Welcome to Time is Not on Your Side with your host, board-certified litigation attorney Robert Eckard. In every episode, we'll hear from other attorneys, accountants, and other professionals who can impact the success of your litigation. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, roberteckardlaw.com. Now here's the host of Time is Not on Your Side, Rob Eckard.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Time is Not on Your Side. Today we have an awesome guest, not only a friend of mine, but a patriot of this country, Alen Tomczak. I'll title this show From Lieutenant with the United States Special Ops to Director of the Defense Division at Cellebrite, a digital intelligence agency. Let me introduce our guest. It's Alen Tomczak. Alen was born and raised here in the Tampa Bay area. Graduated from Seminole High and obtaining a bachelor's degree from University of South Florida here in Tampa. Alen joined the United States Army in 2010 and was commissioned as a second lieutenant with the United States Infantry Division. Alen holds the coveted Expert Infantry Badge, Pathfinder Torch, and Air Assault Badge, and quite a few other medals. He's been deployed overseas to the Horn of Africa, leading a quick reaction force platoon supporting strategic operations throughout the region and effectively deterring enemy reconnaissance and attacks by conducting over 100 combat patrols with his platoon. He also has been part of the French Legion Desert Commando course, which I'm going to ask him about here during today's show. When Alen returned home from active duty, he began to redeploy with local government contractors to advise senior leaders on counter and improvised explosive device missions and technologies in Turkey, Syria, Africa, and other countries. In 2018, Alen developed training programs supporting Afghan commandos in Kabul, Hakia, and Kandahar. And in 2019, Alen moved to the U.S. Special Ops Command, working as a subject matter expert and advisor to USS SOCOM and on sensitive site exploitation operations and evaluating emerging technologies in the field of artificial intelligence. Alen ran for political office in 2021, but had to withdraw from the race and was called to active duty to deploy to Central America, one of my favorite places to go, to train counter-narcotics units on small unit tactics and jungle operations. Alen speaks at least 3 or 4 languages, I think, Polish, Russian, quite amazing guy. He is working currently in the intelligence community as an executive advisor for a company at Cellebrite, the worldwide leader in digital forensics. He continues to be part of the Florida National Guard and recently a team commander for the Army Security Force Assistant Brigade, and today is a company commander for Alpha Company in Leesburg, Florida. Did I miss anything, Alen?
No. Like I said, it's always kind of an interesting thing hearing about yourself, but we do sound a lot better on paper. I tell you what, and that voice of yours really makes me feel a little bit motivated over here. Whoever this Alen, like, be a cool dude.
You're the modern day Rambo. You're a badass. You know, Rambo was in the jungles, although I guess you've spent some time doing that too, the jungles and the deserts, which hopefully we'll have time to talk about today. But you're the modern day Rambo with the skill set that you have and the intellectual digital platform arena to do the things you do. Tell the listeners, or tell me what things that you that your resume doesn't reflect. Some of the stuff that you do and your background and your experience, especially now where you are today in the field of digital evidence.
Yeah, sure. It's my career kind of took a different change after I left the command here in Tampa, Mendel Air Force Base, running for political office. And it came at a time where, I wanted to continue to serve in a way and figure out, what was the most impactful way. And I always, thought that local government really affected us the most. And that kind of transitioned me from essentially the uniform to other opportunities. and left the government. And then sometime after that, I started working for Cellebrite, which was a really cool tool that I fortunately got to use when I was in the military. And essentially what we do is we gather information from a legally seized device. So for those of you that are working essentially supporting law enforcement or in crimes with law enforcement, the phone is really treated like your home, right? So you have to have a search warrant to access someone's phone. So when we get that warrant, we legally obtain that data. We're able to take these terabytes of data that are sometimes on this phone and find that critical evidence. I represent the DoD and the intelligence community in the company. The tool is also used overseas, and it's been a very cool experience to see how we use digital evidence and fight bad guys, and as we like to say, put bullets on or bombs on foreheads, right?
So does your company also work with private parties, or is it strictly a company that works with government agencies?
So there's interesting, the way the tool is designed, there's different silos within the company, and we are divided between an enterprise solution, which even companies like Uber and some of the folks on the SEC use our tools. You can imagine the transfer of financial data across phones can be very sensitive at sometimes, and it has to be tracked if there's some sort of nefarious activity. Uber as well too. For example, if there was a case where someone potentially was involved in an incident where the Uber driver might have done something nefarious, or maybe something that there's a case where a girl got raped in an Uber, right? So the phone will then be processed through our software. So yeah, there's definitely different use cases. There's been some cool ones too. For example, I believe it was down in Fort Myers a few years ago. There was a crime where a gentleman died and they didn't know the time of death. They had an accurate window, but not the exact time. So what we did is Cellebrite came in and found that the refrigerator was a smart refrigerator, and we were able to track every time he got ice, the light turned on, and that data is saved. So he had a pattern where every night before bed he'd fill up a cup of ice. And we're able to track that pattern and then kind of narrow down when the time of death was, and then pull other CCTV footage and really catch the criminal and the murderer entering the home.
I mean, just the ability to have this type of evidence, whether it's locating someone, placing someone at a scene. I mean, the evidence that the digital platforms provide nowadays, like you said, from the refrigerator to car GPS, to cameras on ATM machines or on highways. There's really, it would be very difficult, right? It should be difficult, right? To engage in criminal activity without the expectation that there's going to be something there for law enforcement. So let me ask you this, given what you do, does Cellebrite, or do you, once you get the devices, is that something you're involved in, getting the devices from law enforcement? And if you do, is there something that Cellebrite requires law enforcement to give them that says, hey, this device was legally seized, as compared to, we seized it, but we don't know if we can get in it?
Sure. Yeah, there's times and sometimes it's hard to kind of discuss with the state and local and the law enforcement side, because I do work the DoD side. So there's two different, obviously, authorities on how this tool is used. But for I can talk a little bit about the local side, especially for law enforcement. The chain of custody is always important and critical. We try not to get involved with the chain of custody. We try to provide the tool and the software and the technology to be able to access the information. But we try not to get involved in the chain of custody. We do have some folks that are badged in and work in certain law enforcement agencies, Bureau of Prisons, and others. But which is actually an interesting one. The amount of crime that goes on in prisons in the United States is crazy that I hear about. Yeah, so we try not to get too involved in chain of custody. It always adds an extra unneeded obstacle, right? So it's really, we try to train law enforcement. Your phone should be treated the same way as if someone was taking your DNA or blood sample, right? It is a piece of evidence, and that's what we're trying to advise law enforcement on, is that your phone is like your home, right? It is a part of your digital identity. And in the government side, and I'll talk a little bit about the DoD side on how this kind of falls into the large spectrum of like intelligence, essentially.
Before you do that, let me share with you this. I play this little exercise with non-lawyers in my firm, but I'll say, pretend I'm a police officer.
Mm-hmm.
Give me your phone, and they say, "All right, here," and I go, "No, that's not what you do. You say, do you have a warrant?"
Correct.
Okay, Rob.
Yep.
Give me your phone. Do you have a warrant? Yeah, I have a warrant. Here it is. All right, give me your phone. Hand over the phone. All right, give me the passcode to get in your phone. And they start telling me, I go, no, give me your phone is a Fourth Amendment issue. Tell me the passcode to get in is a Fifth Amendment self-determination issue. So you can have my phone, but you can't get in. But to your point, once you get the device legally, either consensually or by a warrant, then of course you have the ability to go into or look for that digital footprint, correct?
You're absolutely correct. You're 100% correct.
Okay. Well, tell me from the DoD side what you were going to say.
Yeah. So, when we talk about, you're mentioning phones, refrigerators, all these different things, we all have a digital identity now, right? And your identity has now become, whether it's your fingerprint, when you're unlocking the old phone, when you have the fingerprint unlock, or even now you have the purchase. I don't know if you see, you can purchase with the palm of your hand at Whole Foods, right? To biometric scanning, to even your DNA is all kind of.
I go to my doctor and they just say, put your hand on the thing to make sure it's you.
That's it. Right. And we're going to get to the point where that's our credit card. Right. So it's building, and they're doing that in Saudi Arabia right now with that mile-long city where you can turn your car on, go to the grocery store, unlock your door at your house, all with your palm of your hand. Right.
I don't know if you're I don't know you're religious or faithful these, but this is a little bit prophetic, and I think,
right.
in the book of Revelation. But go ahead. Really sorry.
It's kind of scary if you think about it. We're definitely moving in the direction where technology is starting to become a little scary. But that's why we have to have control measures in place, right? And these are one of those tools that the amount of people we've actually exonerated from being guilty is actually phenomenal as well too. Guys that have been charged with the wrong crime, and then we were able to access that digital evidence to prove that they were not there, right? It's very cool. A lot of emotional stories when it comes to that as well too. But when you have your digital identity, it's something called, and the way we look at it now in law enforcement and the DoD is drugs, DNA, and digital evidence, right? So the 3 Ds. It's really kind of the best way to be able to attribute someone. And we're even now going out into where drugs are getting broken down to the chemical compounds to see, what chemical came from what part of the world, right? So we get very specific on how to be able to track and see things and understand the digital identity of someone. So it's very interesting when you combine things like biometrics, DNA, and digital evidence, you really get something called identity operations. And that is a true kind of picture of someone, if that makes sense. So if you actually,
I think that's cool. I love learning new concepts.
Yeah, there's a movie with Mark Wahlberg. I think it's called Mile 21. And if you look in the first scene, dudes kick the door down, grab the phone, quickly swipe the DNA inside the mouth, and take a fingerprint. At that point, right? If I have your phone, your DNA, and your fingerprint, and I store that data, I know everything about you, right? From now to if you do a crime 20 years from now and we find your DNA on it, we'll be able to attribute that, right?
Well, I know in like my criminal cases, after a client or a defendant pleads guilty, they always do of course, the fingerprint and then the swab, mouth swab. So all that goes into APHIS, and I forget the other.
APHIS. Yep, ABIS, Automatic Biometric Information System. Yep.
And it's stored in there, I guess, and then that database just continues to add data to it. So how do you go from an infantry officer, which to me, in my brain, I looked it up, commanding, the definition was commanding an infantry unit, infantry officers lead attacks, defensive operations, and other tactical missions. This sounds like, a guy with a gun in his hand or something more sophisticated. and now you're in the digital evidence arena.
Yeah,
how did that?
I was lucky to meet and fortunately to meet a lot of cool people when I was going through my military career. And I kind of stumbled upon this. So when you were working the counter IED side, you have to think that back then IEDs were really triggered by a lot of them by phones, right? So you would implant an IED underground, and then the guy would sit back 20, 50, 100, 30, 100 meters back and have a phone in the IED, and then he would call that phone, and then the IED would explode based on that communication, right? So when we started seeing a lot of IEDs, the exploitation of those phones to see the data of how who created those IEDs, trying to find those end users of those phones, is essentially how I got first introduced to Cellebrite. And then fast forward a couple of years later, I started studying at USF my master's in intelligence, which at that point I started working at SOCOM, and was introduced again to Cellebrite. And someone asked me, "Hey, have you ever seen this tool before?" And I said, "Yep." And from then on, it's kind of the rest was history. I started working in digital evidence.
Well, I think it's fascinating, the evolution, and it seems as if there's no real end in sight, right? You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube.
You can.
Tell me a little bit, because I'm personally curious about your involvement in Latin America, South America, dealing with the in the narco arena. As you know, I have and continue to represent people from Latin America, either indicted or accused of committing narco trafficking offenses or other crimes, typically maritime offenses, and have worked and continue to with the U.S. DEA and agents around the country and around the world on those types of cases. What has been your involvement in the in that arena, in the narco trafficking arena?
Sure. Yeah. So Florida has something called a state partnership program, which is involved, since the Florida National Guard has a state partnership program, which involves a lot of the Caribbean. And the Caribbean does a training event, usually in somewhere in Central America. It goes between several different countries depending on the year. And as you know, a lot of these guys that are in the military and the DoD, and some of these smaller countries also have a little bit of a law enforcement play, right? Whether it be like their gendarmerie or whether it be their special operations unit. They are militarized, but they also have a police, national police mission as well too. So we'd go down at least once or twice every couple of years and train them on small unit tactics. And what that means is, you know, we can go from anything to treating them first aid medical care to training them how to clear a room, clear a house. So imagine just, you know, kind of like some basic SWAT team training, essentially.
So has it been your experience that on the defense side, the DoD side, I should say, and doing what you do and having come with the background you have you seen that let me just say the bad guys, if you will, have a level of sophistication that is somewhat parallel to what we see with, you know, small, medium, or big government?
You know, absolutely. There's been a huge, in the last, I think, 5 years, a huge advancement in the tactics and technology that cartels use. So when you look, technology keeps becoming cheaper, right? I mean, back in the day, let's use the DJI drone, for example. I remember the first little drone that I bought for my nephew was like $450. Now that same drone at Walmart is like $10, right? But you can fly that thing out of your window and go take surveillance of anyone outside in a certain amount of time. So as technology gets cheaper and you see cartels becoming professional businessmen of now, where they're interacting with international communities as well too, and they're becoming more militarized, and their tactics are becoming very well trained. You are fighting a force now that no longer is it like, you know, the old Pablo Escobar movies where a guy's running out with an AK. You're having trained professionals with really good military tactics that know what they're doing, and they have the technology to support it too, which becomes very scary. Criminals are very smart. They understand, they watch our tactics, they understand our technology, and they adapt, as do we, right? Everyone has to adapt. And that's just something within your operational environment, right? Whether you walk into a courtroom 500 times, you're going to adapt each time and learn, you know, how the other case and how you could do better. The same thing happens with criminals in the military. We go on a mission, we come back, and we look, how can we do better? And we were continuously adapting.
Well, let me ask you about a specific platform, and I don't want to catch you off guard, but I'm just curious about it because it's one that's used heavily, both by, in my experience, the United States DEA and by me. But WhatsApp, you familiar with WhatsApp?
Yeah.
And supposedly the WhatsApp platform is an encrypted platform from end to end, right? Mm-hmm. Can you share any secrets on that? Because I'll tell you, it is typically a platform that is used by me and others in the government when communicating in reference to certain movement of maybe illegal products within or towards the United States, and it could be in assisting law enforcement, whether it's through special operations with DEA and their counterparts in Latin America or Central America, but they are sensitive. It's sensitive information that's shared, including coordinates, amounts, involvement, people, all these kinds of things. So is that platform really that secure?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the question is, there's always something out there, right? Whether it be, even iMessage is technically very secure. So you have WhatsApp, Signal. Now a lot of people are using Discord. I always tell people, don't ever put something in writing in the digital side if you don't want anyone else knowing, right? So I'm not saying that it's not secure, but there's always better ways to communicate, in my opinion.
And of course, if that device is seized, then you have the whole, possible string of communications, right?
You do. And then, WhatsApp is a great platform. I think it was designed to be not used for nefarious activity, but unfortunately some things adapt, and, there's a lot of bad people out there. So WhatsApp, Signal, they're all designed to be able to securely transfer messages and data. And, it's one of those things that criminals take. And like we talked about earlier, they adapt and they use tools that were normally designed for good for other things.
Well, let me ask you, I looked up the definition of digital forensics. And of course, I pulled this off of Interpol this morning, but whether you agree or can add to it is digital forensics is a branch of forensic science that focuses on identifying, acquiring, processing, analyzing, and reporting on data stored electronically. And the main goal of digital forensics is to extract data from the electronic evidence, process it into actionable intelligence, and present the findings for the prosecution or your client.
That's correct.
That kind of wrap it all up.
Correct. Yeah, it's actually a new emerging thing. So digital forensics never really existed until probably like 2015, 16, when the phones started getting smarter and like the evolution of like essentially the touch screen, right? Our phones are no longer the Nokias, right? So now we have little computers in our pockets. Some of them are even better than some computers. But so when that kind of emerged, new forensics started emerging, right? And digital forensics being one of them. And we're still playing catch up, right? The community as a whole is playing catch up in digital forensics. There's always a new update on a phone, or there's always a new phone, or always a new chipset. Rightfully so. A lot of these companies, they put privacy first, and that's very important because we all value that. But like we said, with some of these applications out there, sometimes people adapt and use these things for nefarious activities. So forensics is really the art form of trying to forensically acquire data that is legally obtained.
Given what you do for a living, I'm just curious, you hear these stories about street criminals stealing cell phones and then, of course, accessing them to get on Cash App or Venmo and transferring. Mm-hmm. Do you use those apps?
Yeah, so I use them. Two-factor authentication is a great thing. Thankfully, a lot of these criminals do not have Cellebrite, so we're very safe in that aspect. So if you find your phone, the best thing is if your phone's taken, there's really cool features. iPhone's fantastic. Apple's fantastic at this. You can log in from your computer, wipe your entire phone remotely, right? It's great for those types of, if your phone gets stolen, right? And it's happened to me. I had a couple nights where I've had a little bit too much fun, left my phone in Uber, and then I'm tracking the location somewhere right to it. It's done, right? So the two-factor authentication. If you don't have two-factor authentication in any of your phones, make sure to have it.
Okay. What's your typical day like? Is there a typical day?
Oh gosh, it's exciting. I get to travel a lot, which I'm very thankful for. Been to a lot of different countries. But
are you here in Florida today? I know yesterday you weren't.
I am actually in my house for once. So it's a rare sighting. So you caught me at a good time. But yeah, you know, it really depends. I try to, obviously, I think one of the most important things about being a professional is also taking care of your mental health and your physical fitness. So as you know, working out and trying to stay healthy is always a challenge, especially when you're traveling a lot. So I try to make sure to eat healthy, try to work out the best that I can. You know, the days of me waking up at 05 and running 5 miles with a backpack on my back maybe aren't there anymore, but still, you know, it's very important to stay, you know, it helps out your attentiveness, and especially when you're talking to clients and customers and talking about things like we're talking about today, you got to be sharp, right? And you got to exercise your physical fitness just as much as you do your brain, and both coincide together. So I like to work out. I try to, you know, eat healthy. I have some hobbies as well too. I like to make my own music. I will not share that with you at all because it's absolutely terrible, but I try. And, you know, spend time with Taylor. So it's an interesting and fun life, and I live a fast-paced life. I'm always on the plane, always traveling.
I didn't know you're a musician. One of my best friends is in charge of DEA operations in Paris, France, at the embassy, and he's a musician also. And I didn't realize how good of a musician. He started a band over there where he's got all the different diplomats and folks from the embassy in his band, and I'm like, that's crazy. So I need to have him watch this episode and connect you guys when he gets back into town. That's great. I know we're running out of time, and I know you're busy, so I don't want to run over for you. But can you give the audience an idea of maybe some of the cases you worked on, or some of your favorite cases, or some of the favorite things you've done with your background and training with the digital evidence?
Yeah, sure. So when I was working for the government, we it can't talk about a lot of them, unfortunately. But there has been some very cool cases.
Come on, nobody will know.
Over the last couple of years that, you know, I was aware of and was involved in, whether in the background or directly. And they were featured on the news a couple of times. And there's a lot of things that are going on in the Middle East. And one of the cool things about working in the government is, although you're overworked and underpaid, it's definitely rewarding turning on the TV and knowing that you were involved in something that is more than you, and seeing it on the news or reading about it, saying, hey, I had a part in that, is really, really cool. Really, really cool.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't work for the government anymore. And to be part of a interdiction of a large quantity of, cocaine off the north coast of Colombia or somewhere on the Honduran Rise because of a cooperating witness, and then you see it on the news or in the Colombian news or newspapers, and you know that as a result of your client's involvement with that, that intel resulted in assets being used to seize that. And of course, nobody knows that on the back end, right? And you see it. It's interesting. Sure.
Yeah, it's fun. It's exciting. Especially I hear about things. I have a lot of friends that work in this field, and every now and then I'll get a phone call and say, "Hey, we just used your company's software for to take down a human trafficking ring." We work with an awesome nonprofit called Exodus Road, and if you look, I think it was in 2018, they were in Burma, and there was an incident where a driver of a truck got pulled over, and in the back there was 13 young girls, and the driver started to run, and he left his phone. So with one UFID device, which is what we call our software, with one UFID device, they were able to take down 40 government officials and find 300 women, and found 30 mass graves in Burma, just with one cell phone and one.
Wow.
So when you hear about these stories, and it really kind of makes you wake up in the morning and understand that you're part of something bigger, and it definitely keeps you motivated for sure.
Yeah, well, my wife is from Thailand, and I've been paying more attention to the Pacific Rim and those countries, and of course Myanmar and Burma border Thailand, and of course that country's had its turmoil for many years and continues to, but to be part of that rescue operation, or at least lead to the seizure or convictions of those wrongdoers with those human trafficking, is Amazing. In the last minute or so that we have, can you, to any of the maybe younger lawyers or professionals or students, whether they be in college or in law school, or how do they get into this field of cybersecurity and digital evidence and forensics?
Sure. It's interesting, actually. Digital evidence, especially for lawyers, is very important. You were kind of talking about it when we were backstage before this. You have to learn how to understand how to find evidence. And when you're given a terabytes and terabytes of data and that haystack, and you need to find that needle, being able to find that evidence is critical, especially as a lawyer, and understanding that evidence too, whether you're on the defensive side or on the prosecution side. Understanding how that evidence was obtained is important. So there's definitely education out there. Florida International University, FIU, has a great program in digital evidence. Their campus, although they're headquartered in Miami, their digital evidence campus is right here in Largo, Florida. They are fantastic and one of the premier training sites. A lot of the folks that are looking to work on the state prosecution side, there is classes and availability for the government to take Cellebrite classes as well from us. So there is a lot of education out there. And if it's something you want to get into, a lot of the major universities such as FIU have courses in this, and learning this, in my opinion, will just make you a much better lawyer, because, as you know, every crime has a digital device.
I see that USF announced that it was starting a cyber security degree program, which is my undergraduate alma mater, your undergraduate alma mater, which I thought was fantastic and very interesting. Does Cellebrite, how do they recruit for folks to work for them?
Yeah, so we like to recruit folks out of the community. So we recruit a lot of folks that were working either in the sheriff's office, DEA, the government, in order to essentially have that knowledge. But we also have a lot of developers and software users. We always have legal counsels that need to advise us. We have a huge, tremendous, and I love them, great ethics board as well too. So there's a lot of involvement. Cellebrite is located in several different countries. Our headquarters is in Tel Aviv, but we have a U.S. headquarters in Washington, Tel Aviv, London, Berlin, Singapore, and Brazil. We're always recruiting. Check out the website, the career page. If you have any friends that are looking to get into this, please share my contact info. Something I'm very passionate about. Like I said, I don't think digital evidence is going away anytime soon. And I think the more that we learn about it and the safe handling of it, the processing it, the analyzing of it, makes us all kind of subject matter experts at this and makes everyone safer.
Wonderful. And if any of our viewers or listeners want to get in touch with you, instead of them bugging you, they can reach out to me through my law firm, which is plastered all over the internet, or this YouTube, on YouTube, which this podcast will be on, and other social media platforms, and reach out to me and say, hey, I want to talk to that guy, Alen Tomczak, and I'll vet those folks for you, Alen, so you're not being bothered. But I'd love for you to be able to share that information. I got to get you down to Stetson College of Law as a guest speaker, maybe in one of their forensic classes, because I think you'd like to share, or their international criminal law program, to talk to students, law students, about what you do. I think it's amazing. Any last words before we wrap it up?
Something kind of struck me when you said, how did you get into this? And for a lot of the young lawyers that are kind of listening to this today, just a word of advice that's always worked for me is, and I know it sounds kind of cliche, but take every opportunity that you can, take every lunch that you can, take every meeting that you can. Always make friends, never burn bridges, because you're never going to know who you meet and where they go down later on in life. The communities that we work in, especially, in my community, but even the legal community, is very small, right? So for us, especially in my community, if you're in the DOD, you could be someone that I ran into 10 years ago, and who knows, we'll run into each other again. It's happened to me before, where I've ran into someone that I met 10 years ago. We're in Turkey, and then, I'm walking down and I'm like, oh, hey man, and where do you work? And then that creates another opportunity. So always try to meet people, always put your best foot forward, and take every opportunity you can, because you don't know what it's going to lead you to.
Great advice. I mean, I was looking for information on a particular issue out in Los Angeles with the U.S. Customs Immigration Service. And I came to learn that a kid that was a year behind me in my little town of Central New York in high school was the director for USCIS out in LA. It was just, you just never know. And another friend of mine who I met through a DEA agent runs now Panama DEA operations. And so getting to know people, I agree. That advice is so valuable for anybody listening. And whether you're a law student, college student, professional, connections matter, and learning from those folks matters.
Your network is you, right? And someone once told me, which was advice that I took really to heart, and try to make an impact at least once a week. Try to make an impact. Either leave an impression on someone or do something that is either enhances you professionally or personally, but try to make one impact every week. It doesn't have to be major, just something small. So that way at the end of the week, you can say, I made an impact on something. And you'll start to see how those things collect. So either take a meeting that's outside of your usual network, or go meet someone for lunch, or go challenge yourself in a new workout, or take your wife out on a cool new date that you haven't been to yet at all. Continue to make an impact, at least one a week. And you'll see how much that just kind of changes you as a person for the better, because you'll start meeting new people, start building connections, and people will start to kind of relate you to like, hey, this guy is or girl is just always putting their best foot forward. So make an impact, because that eventually will become a habit, and you'll start doing it more than just one time a week.
You're an apex guy, man, and I can see why you've been successful and continue to be successful. So I don't want to take any more of your time. I know you're busy. You've got something going on after this, but I do really appreciate it. I'd love to have you back again, if possible, and share some more of your views. It's been really interesting. I can't wait till this session records.
Cool. Sounds good, brother. And always good to see you. And for everyone on the show, thank you for joining. And it's awesome. See you
Alen Tomczak. Again, the title of our show today was Lieutenant with the United States Army Special Ops to Director of Defense Division at Cellebrite, a digital intelligence company. If you like our show, make sure you click like on all our social media platforms, and enjoy Time Is Not On Your Side of all our episodes. Until next time, race ipso loquitur, folks. Have a good day.
Take care.
You've been tuning into Time Is Not On Your Side with your host, board-certified litigation attorney, Robert Eckard. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, roberteckardlaw.com. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others.